All right, guys, so good morning. Here's our science lesson for today. So, we've been spending some time talking about ecosystems and looking at how things are connected. With PhD yesterday, or PhD, the older system, we sort of started looking at matter and how things are sustained by matter. We're going to get there in the next lesson, but in this lesson for mystery science, we're going to build on the biosphere that we were talking about yesterday and the day before. We looked at what would be growing or what you would take into a biosphere if you had to survive for 2 years. And you looked at plants and animals and things that you would need that could grow and continue to sustain itself, right? They weren't just a one-time thing. So we're talking about that life cycle, that food chain, that idea that things are connected. And so today we're going to look at one particular animal in that food chain. The first thing that we're going to look at is a hawk and looking at why it would move to the city. So we're looking at why is it that a hawk would move to the city. We think about animals, we think about birds, we think about them living in nature, in the woods. We don't think about them living in a city so much. So we definitely have this question of why would they come to the city when it doesn't feel like their natural place? So we're going to explore that today. Bear with me as I figure this whole computer thing out. I've got a program that's going to work better, but I can't seem to get it to work today. So here's how we're going to make this work. All right.
Hi, it's Doug. A few weekends ago, I was at a park in the city with some friends of mine, and we had some food with us. And like you might expect in a city park, there were a lot of bees. Pigeons. When we got there, my friend was like, "Ugh, I hate pigeons."
Hey,
I don't
use
know
the word
how
hate.
you feel about pigeons, but we all know pigeons are the most common bird you find in a city. My friend was getting a little annoyed that day because every time he'd turn away from his food to talk to me, these pigeons would come up and try to grab at it. My friend had to keep shooing them off over and over. But it didn't matter. The pigeons kept coming back. So finally at one point he yelled, "Get away!" And every single pigeon took off. My friend was like, "Ha, finally!" But I realized something. I said, "I don't think it was actually you who scared those pigeons off." "Look up," I said. And sure enough, we both looked up, and there was this. A red-tailed hawk circling overhead. "Whoa, is that a hawk?" my friend said. "I didn't know those lived in cities." "How'd you know to look for that?" There were a couple clues. First of all, if you've ever spent time in a city, then you know it's actually pretty hard to scare away pigeons. They're not afraid to come right up to people, probably because they've learned we have delicious, tasty treats. The second clue is that even though pigeons live in cities and seem not to be scared of anything, they do have one thing they're really scared of. And that's their predators, animals which hunt and eat them. Everyone knows about city pigeons, but people are surprised to find out that hawks and falcons are starting to live in cities now too, and they're doing really well. Some city hawks are even famous, like this red-tailed hawk who lives in New York City's Central Park. The people of New York City love this guy. They've named him Pale Male because he's a boy and he has some pale-colored feathers on his head. In order to live in a city, there are really only a couple things that a predator like Pale Male needs access to. In the wild, hawks prefer high places to build their nests, places like the side of a cliff. But Pale Male has figured out that in the city, skyscrapers work just as well for that. So, no problem. And then, of course, any predator needs prey, the animals that it eats in order to stay alive. In the wild, hawks prey on small birds. You know, cities are full of those. So it's surprising to find wildlife other than pigeons living in cities. But you can find wildlife like hawks and falcons. And that's because every animal has some other living things that it's linked to. Pigeons are preyed upon by hawks and falcons. So where there are pigeons, there are hawks and falcons around too. Or as another example, consider this squirrel. Think about what...
I don't know about you, but in my neighborhood, there are tons of squirrels and chipmunks all around. my neighborhood, it's constant with them running around, and Bailey Boo Boo, of course, wants to chase them all. But what about you? Do you have a lot of animals that are living in your area? Do you have a lot of chipmunks and squirrels? Maybe red squirrels living in your space? What do you have? All right, let's see what's going on.
What kind of living things it's linked to. Whenever you see an animal, you could always discover the links to other wildlife by asking two simple questions. What does it eat? And what is it eaten by? I call these the food chain questions. So think about the squirrel. If you saw this squirrel in your neighborhood, which living things should you also be able to find near you just by asking the two food chain questions?
Okay, so I don't know about you, but I know that in my neighborhood I've seen a lot of squirrels and chipmunks. A couple of years ago, just off my deck, I saw a fisher cat. We had a ton of chipmunks in that year. And the next thing I know, I'm looking out my window, and I thought, what is that? It looks like a weasel or something. And sure enough, it was a fisher cat, and it's one of the things they eat. So I've seen a fisher cat in my neighborhood. I see a ton of owls when I'm walking Bailey. I hear the how hoo 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 hoo. So I know there are tons of owls around. I see them every once in a while. I'm always amazed. They're so quiet when they are flying. You can barely hear them. They're amazing. But I know they're around, and I know that's because there are a lot of the food that they like to eat, namely chipmunks and squirrels. So the question for me is, what do you see in your neighborhood? And we're going to talk more about that at the end of this video. And what your assignment is going to be looking at what's around your neighborhood and maybe finding that question. Uh-oh, I had a technical meltdown there. All right, I'll fix that. All right, so let's look a little bit more at what's coming for this whole idea of what's being eaten and what is it eating in some examples that Doug found in his neighborhood. All right, hold on. Boo Boo, we don't need your help, thank you.
With any animal, by asking the two questions, what does it eat and what's it eaten by, you can always spot a link that the animal is part of. You might have heard that scientists call this a food chain. Now here,
has anybody else had their cat bring home a mouse or something to their after they've been outside hunting?
Here, the squirrel is in the middle of the food chain. What does it eat? Acorns, which grow on oak trees. What's it eaten by? There are a few different predators that eat squirrels. A cat is one example. So there's a food chain linking cats to squirrels to oak trees. Now, even if you're in a place where you don't think there's any interesting wildlife, I think you'll be surprised by what kinds of animals and plants you can find if you think about the food chains. You might even find plants and animals you didn't even know existed. One of my favorite tricks for finding creatures is to look for rotting logs on the ground. If you carefully roll one over, like this guy's doing here, there's almost always some kind of interesting little bugs, like this little millipede here, or sometimes toads and tree frogs too. For example, I live in a city. Next to my apartment is this little yard that I share with our neighbors. Now, I really never would have thought anything interesting could live in this little yard. But a few weekends ago, I noticed there was an old board lying on the ground, probably left over from construction. I thought, well, let's see if my log rolling trick really works. Sure enough, when I rolled it over, I found this. It's a beetle. They have these little pinchers. And I wondered, well, what do they eat? When I went online and looked up what they ate, I read that they like to find and eat the caterpillars of moths. When I saw that, I was like, wait a second. There's a link I didn't even realize. Living near my apartment are moths that fly into our stairwell every night outside our front door. When I get up in the morning and I walk down the stairs, I always wind up seeing those interesting moths on the walls. So I suddenly realized all those moths I'd seen living in our stairwell had hatched from caterpillars that didn't get eaten by the beetles in the side yard. I thought, Okay, so that's what the beetles eat. But then I asked myself the other food chain question. What are the beetles eaten by? As I kept looking under that wooden board, I saw something else, too. It tried to hide from me, scurried and buried itself in the mud. I was like, wait, what is that, a snake? But it had legs. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but as I carefully picked it up, I realized it was this. Do you know what this is? It looks a bit like a lizard, but it's not a lizard. It's called a salamander. Salamanders are amphibians. They're like frogs with long tails. They even start out in life as little tadpoles. I was so excited to find this. I couldn't believe I could find a salamander living in the city right outside my window all this time. When I looked them up on the internet, guess what? I found out they eat beetles. So there was an entire food chain happening right there in my little yard in the city. Salamanders, which eat beetles, which eat tiny moth caterpillars. All of this happening under a wooden board in my yard. What could you find where you live? Well, try my trick of looking for a log to roll over. Don't be scared. There's usually very little that can hurt you. If you do have any wildlife in your area that could be harmful, talk about that with a teacher or a parent. You know, you might need to shake the log with your and always be sure to be gentle when you roll a log over. Place it back carefully. You wouldn't want to crush any little salamanders or beetles that live under it. Whether you find something under a log, or in a tree, or in the grass, when you do find a creature you're interested in, remember to ask yourself the food chain questions. What does it eat, and what's it eaten by? When you ask these questions, I guarantee you it will lead you to some other interesting links. So take a moment now. What are some animals you think you might be able to find in your neighborhood? And what if you ask the food chain questions? Does it lead you to think of any new animals to look for?
Okay. So we're going to stop it there. Can you... Oh, shush. Say hi, Bobo. I know. So much to say. All right, so she's playing, so sorry about that, but stand by. Okay. Stop. All done. Get your ball. Get your ball. You're being very rude. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on here. What I want you to do today is I want you to explore this question of what's in your neighborhood. What is it that you see in your area for that might be part of a food chain? I'm just asking you to think about, it's easy to look in the woods and think, oh yeah, sure, what have you. This is, that's kind of what happens in nature. But it's important to realize that nature's happening around us. We are all still, it's all happening in our world. So there's two questions you want to be thinking about when you're looking at this. So in terms of why would a hawk move to the city? Let's look at it. So we have a food chain. Oh, I don't like this marker. I will take a picture of this and post this on Google Classroom for you. So we have a food chain, and the question we have is, what would that animal or that plant, well, animal, because plants don't eat necessarily, but what would it eat? And I can't talk and right at the same time. So what would it eat? And the other question is what would eat it? See, I told you I can't type and talk and write it at the same time. All right, so not that you can see this, but what would eat it? So today I want you, for your assignment, I want you to go outside or look outside if you can't go outside, but look and see what you see. Do you see birds? Do you see squirrels? Do you see any other animal? If you can go outside and be a little exploratory, be safe. Remember, you can't just walk around without an adult. You need to make sure you have their permission or they come with you. And if you're doing anything to look over logs or to look under things, carefully, please. The animals, that is their habitat. You cannot just destroy where they're living, right? We never want to hurt anything when we're a scientist. That's not our goal. We want to observe, we want to learn something, but certainly you don't want to hurt anything. So take a look. Find that piece that's in the middle. Find that middle object and see that question. What is it that it is going to eat? Can you find what it's eating? Is it a plant? Is it another animal? And then what's going to eat it? If it's a predator, then probably it's also a prey. So I will put a picture of this on Google Classroom for you to help you. Now, how are you going to complete this assignment? Well, you have a couple of options. One, you can go ahead and draw it out on paper. You don't have to if you're not artistic the way I am. If you like Google Slides and you want to do Google Slides, go ahead and do Google Slides. If you are in my classroom or Mrs. Kerrigan's classroom and you're comfortable with storyboard, you can use that. I will set something up there. Either way, you just have to email it to me email me what you do. So if your parents take a picture of what you draw, you can email it to me. The email is hickey.m@nashua.edu. If it's a PowerPoint and you want to just share the document with me, you can do that. If you want to take a picture of it and then put it into a PowerPoint, I'm saying PowerPoint, I mean slides. Put it in a slides and share the slides with me, that works too. However you can get it back to me is the easiest way. I'll be totally acceptable to that. So your job today for homework is obviously have watched this video and then go outside, spend a little bit of time, come up with probably 2, if you can find 2 different food webs that you can create by seeing what's in your neighborhood. What do you see? Look online. If you can't go outside, my last resort is I will post a little video of something that you can observe and you can make some connections with. So that's your last resort if for some reason you can't get outside and look, or you can't look out your window and see anything. But I will make sure that you have a second, or that'll be the 3rd or 4th video of the day to see what is going on. So I think that's clear. I think you have a pretty good understanding of what's happening. I need to end this video so I can do my office hours. If you have questions, obviously reach out to me, please. Feel free. Your parents have my contact number. You also have my email. You have Google Classroom. Lots of ways to reach out to me. But remember, I should be hearing from you with your work every single day, but also I should be touching base with you almost every other day or so. So if you are in my classroom, if you're not, once a week, if you're in Mr. Byron's classroom or Mrs. Kerrigan's classroom. Okay, I think I'm figuring this out. I hope you guys are having a good day. I don't know about you, but we had fun in the sun yesterday after that snow stopped and a lot of our snow melted. So I'm going to try to work really hard until about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then I'm going to take a little break. So if you need anything, reach out. Take care. I miss you all. I miss your faces. I miss you laughing at my jokes, even when they're not good ones. And I'll talk to you guys, or you guys will see me soon. Bye.